It's 3 in the afternoon at a preschool in Seoul, and a 4-year-old boy named Miho has just knocked over an entire tower of blocks his classmates spent 20 minutes building. The other child starts crying. Miho's face turns red. His fists clench. You can see it coming like a wave about to crash. And then it happens. He screams. He throws himself on the floor. His legs kick the air. His teacher, Mississippi Park, doesn't rush over. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't try to pick him up or tell him to stop. She does something that would seem absolutely counterintuitive to most Western parents. She sits down on the floor 3 feet away from him. She doesn't speak. She simply breathes. Slowly. Visibly. Her shoulders rise and fall like the tide. And within 60 seconds, without a single word, Miho's screaming begins to soften. His body starts to still. He looks at her. And in that glance, something shifts. This isn't magic. This is method. And it's something Korean early childhood educators have been refining for decades, rooted in principles that most parents have never heard of but that science is now proving to be extraordinarily effective. It's called Joyong Presence, which loosely translates to calm witnessing. And once you understand how it works, you'll never look at a tantrum the same way again. Let's be honest. Most of us were raised to believe that when a child has a meltdown, we need to do something immediately. We need to stop the behavior. We need to correct it. We need to teach the child that this isn't acceptable. And so we react. We raise our voices to be heard over the crying. We issue consequences. We try to rationalize with a child whose brain is quite literally offline. We say things like stop it right now or you're going to time out or I'm counting to 3. And sometimes, if we're really overwhelmed, we might even say something we regret. But here's what's happening in that moment. Your child's amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for emotional reactions, is in full activation mode. Their prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic, self-control, and understanding consequences, has essentially shut down. It's not that they don't want to listen to you. It's that they neurologically cannot process what you're saying. Imagine trying to have a rational conversation with someone who's drowning. That's what it's like trying to reason with a child in the middle of an emotional flood. And when we respond with our own urgency, our own frustration, our own raised voices, we're not calming the storm. We're adding wind to it. We become part of the chaos instead of the anchor. And this is where most well-meaning parents get trapped. They think they're teaching discipline, but what they're actually doing is teaching their child that emotions are dangerous, that big feelings lead to big reactions from the people they love most, and that they are alone in their overwhelm. The child doesn't learn emotional regulation. They learn emotional suppression or emotional escalation, neither of which serves them in the long run. Now let's go back to that classroom in Seoul. What Mississippi Park understands, what many Korean early childhood educators are trained to understand, is that a tantrum is not a behavior problem. It's a nervous system problem. The child is not trying to manipulate you. They are drowning in an emotional experience they do not yet have the brain development to manage alone. And so the adult's job is not to stop the tantrum. It's to become the regulating presence that helps the child's nervous system return to baseline. This concept is deeply embedded in Korean educational philosophy, which draws from Confucian principles of emotional harmony and Buddhist practices of mindful presence. But you don't need to be Korean or Buddhist to apply it. You just need to understand that your calm is contagious. And so is your chaos. In Korean early education settings, teachers are trained in something called co-regulation before correction. This means that before any teaching, any consequence, any conversation about what went wrong, the adult must first help the child return to a state of calm. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, can be learned in a state of panic. The method is disarmingly simple. When a child begins to escalate, the teacher positions themselves nearby but not hovering. They make themselves physically lower, often sitting, so they are not looming over the child. They do not make demands. They do not ask questions. They do not try to fix it. They simply breathe with intention. Their presence says I am here, you are safe, and I am not afraid of your feelings. And because the human nervous system is designed to sync with the nervous systems around it, especially those of trusted caregivers, the child begins to regulate. Let's look at what's happening in the brain during this process. When a child is in meltdown mode, their sympathetic nervous system is activated. This is the fight or flight response. Cortisol and adrenaline flood their little body. Their heart rate spikes. Their breathing becomes shallow and rapid. Their muscles tense. They are, in every biological sense, in survival mode. Now, when an adult responds with intensity, matching the child's energy or even escalating it, the child's nervous system interprets this as confirmation that the threat is real. But when an adult responds with calm, with slow intentional breaths, with a soft gaze and a grounded body, the child's nervous system receives a different message. It says the danger has passed. You can come back now. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest, recovery, and emotional regulation. The child's heart rate begins to slow. Their breathing deepens. Their muscles start to release. This is not about obedience. This is about biology. You are literally lending your regulated nervous system to a child whose system is not yet developed enough to regulate on its own. And this is why the Korean method is so powerful. It's not about controlling the child. It's about co-regulating with the child. It respects the developmental reality that children under the age of 5, and often older, do not have the neural architecture to calm themselves down from a state of high distress without support. They need us to be the external regulator until their internal regulator is fully formed. And that takes time. It takes repetition. And it takes a parent or caregiver who is willing to be the calm in the storm rather than another wave. So what does this look like in practice, especially when your child is losing it in the middle of the grocery store or during bedtime, or when you're already exhausted and touched out and running on 3 hours of sleep? Here's the framework. First, and this is the hardest part, you pause. You do not react immediately. You take one breath. Just one. In through the nose, out through the mouth. This is not for the child. This is for you. Because if you are dysregulated, you cannot regulate anyone else. You are putting on your own oxygen mask first. Second, you lower yourself physically. Get down to the child's level. Sit on the floor if you can. Kneel. Make yourself smaller. This is not about submission. It's about safety. A large figure looming over a distressed child activates their threat response even more. A calm, grounded adult at eye level signals safety. Third, you stay close but give space. You do not grab them unless they are in danger. You do not try to hold them still. You simply stay near. Your body language says I am not going anywhere, and you are not too much for me. Fourth, you breathe with intention. Loud enough that they might hear it, slow enough that it begins to shift the energy in the room. You are not trying to make them breathe with you. You are simply offering your calm as a resource. Fifth, and this might feel strange at first, you say nothing. No questions. No explanations. No lectures. Silence is not abandonment. Silence is spaciousness. It allows the child's system to reset without the added cognitive load of processing language. And then, once the storm has passed, once you see their body begin to soften, their breath begin to even out, their eyes begin to focus again, only then do you speak. And what you say matters. You do not say why did you do that, or that was unacceptable, or you need to apologize right now. You say something like that was really hard, wasn't it? Or your body had such big feelings. Or I stayed with you. You're safe now. You are naming what happened without shame. You are reconnecting before you redirect. Because a child who feels seen and safe is a child who can learn. Here's what happens when you practice this consistently. The tantrums don't disappear overnight. They won't. Because tantrums are a developmental stage, not a behavior that can be trained away. But what changes is the duration and the intensity. A meltdown that used to last 15 minutes might now last 5. A child who used to throw things might now just cry. And over time, as their brain develops and as they experience your consistent co-regulation, they begin to internalize that capacity. They start to calm themselves faster. They start to use words earlier in the emotional cycle. They start to come to you when they feel overwhelmed instead of collapsing into chaos. Because you have taught them, through your body and your breath and your presence, that feelings are not dangerous, that they are not alone, and that you are a safe place to return to. This is not permissive parenting. This is not letting the child do whatever they want. It's actually the opposite. It's teaching them the most important skill they will ever need, which is how to return to themselves when they feel lost. And that is something no timeout, no consequence, no punishment can teach. Now here's the part that most parenting advice skips over. This method requires something from you that is incredibly difficult. It requires you to be regulated when your child is not. It requires you to stay calm when every instinct in your body is screaming at you to make it stop. It requires you to sit with discomfort, with noise, with the feeling that you are doing nothing when in fact you are doing the most important thing. And if you grew up in a household where big emotions were met with anger or dismissal or punishment, this will feel almost impossible at first. Because you are not just parenting your child. You are reparenting yourself. You are learning to tolerate the emotional intensity that you were never allowed to have. And that is hard, tender, necessary work. You might need to practice this when your child is calm first. You might need to literally rehearse sitting on the floor and breathing slowly so that when the moment comes, your body knows what to do. You might need to give yourself permission to fail at this and try again. Because this is not about being perfect. It's about being present. And presence is a practice, not a destination. Let's talk about what this looks like in a Korean preschool over the course of weeks and months. In the beginning, when a new child enters the program, tantrums are frequent. The child is adjusting to a new environment, new adults, new rules. The teachers expect this. They do not see it as a problem to be solved. They see it as information. The child is telling us they are overwhelmed. And so they respond with joy on presence every single time. No matter how many times it happens. Day after day, the child experiences the same response. An adult who does not flinch. An adult who does not punish. An adult who simply stays. And slowly, something remarkable happens. The child begins to trust that their feelings will not drive the adult away. They begin to trust that they are safe even in their worst moments. And that trust becomes the foundation for everything else. For cooperation. For learning. For resilience. The teachers don't celebrate when the tantrums decrease. They don't praise the child for holding it together. Because the goal was never to stop the feelings. The goal was to teach the child that they are not their feelings. That feelings come and go like weather. And that there is always a steady ground beneath them. This is the difference between behavior modification and emotional development. One tries to control the outside. The other nurtures the inside. And only one of them creates lasting change. There is a moment that happens, usually a few months into practicing this method, that parents describe as almost spiritual. It's the moment when your child, in the middle of a meltdown, reaches for you. Not because they want you to fix it, but because they want you near. It's the moment when your presence becomes their safe place instead of their battleground. And in that moment, something shifts in you too. You realize that you are not failing when your child has big feelings. You are succeeding when you can hold space for those feelings without losing yourself. You realize that the goal was never to raise a child who never cries. It was to raise a child who knows they can cry and still be loved. Who knows they can fall apart and still be held. Who knows that their worth is not contingent on their behavior. And that realization changes everything. It changes the way you see tantrums. It changes the way you see your child. It changes the way you see yourself as a parent. Korean educators have a saying. The adult must be the mountain. Not the avalanche. The mountain does not move when the wind howls. It does not crumble when the storm rages. It simply stands. And because it stands, everything else can weather the storm and return to peace. This is your role. Not to stop the weather. But to be the steady ground beneath it. Not to eliminate your child's emotions. But to teach them that no emotion is bigger than the love that holds them. This is not easy work. It will not feel natural at first, especially if you were raised in a culture that values compliance over connection, obedience over emotional intelligence. But it is possible. And it is worth it. Because what you are doing is not just managing behavior. You are shaping a nervous system. You are building a blueprint for how your child will relate to their own emotions for the rest of their life. You are teaching them that they are not too much. That they are not broken. That they are deeply, profoundly, unconditionally worthy. Even on their worst days. Especially on their worst days. And that lesson, that embodied knowing, is the greatest gift you will ever give them. It is the foundation of self-worth, of resilience, of the capacity to love and be loved. And it starts with you, sitting on the floor, breathing slowly, being the calm your child needs to find their way back to themselves. Your child does not need you to be perfect. They do not need you to have all the answers or to never lose your patience. What they need is for you to try. To pause when you want to react. To breathe when you want to yell. To sit when you want to walk away. They need you to be human, flawed, and trying. Because that is how they learn that they too can be imperfect and still be enough. That is how they learn what love actually looks like. Not a feeling. But a choice. The choice to stay. To witness. To hold space. To be the mountain. And in a world that is so loud, so fast, so full of pressure and performance, that choice is revolutionary. It is the quiet rebellion of presence. And it changes everything.